Hey, what's going on, Faithful? Thanks so much. And it's been a little bit, but I wanted to get on and talk about 49ers football. Obviously, it's right around the corner. Can't wait for preseason to start. Lots to get into. First and foremost, it's good to have Coach Shanahan back. So Kyle's going to be back on the sideline against the Titans next Thursday, or I should say this Thursday coming up, which will be basically week one for everybody else other than that Hall of Fame game, which was kind of a fun game that we saw between the Cardinals and the Panthers, and kicked off a great weekend of or leading into the weekend of festivities for the Hall of Fame class of 2026. Incredible class, just a really cool class that had a lot of guys, especially from my generation. I'm 39 now. I'm about to be 40 later this year, and so it was just cool to see guys like Drew Brees get in. Was one of my favorite quarterbacks really to watch. The guy was just so calm and cool all the time, and somewhat overshadowed, I thought, in an era where you had Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Kurt Warner and all these guys who are obviously gold jacket guys. Oh, Brady's gonna eventually be, because he just retired not that long ago. He just kept going and going, like the Energizer Bunny. Other than these other dudes that once they were about 35, 36, and I guess Breeze played until basically my age, about the age 39 or 40 season, and so incredible, just incredible. A guy that started out in San Diego, which they were still called the San Diego Chargers, and he talks about that. I totally forgot that he got to play with guys like Doug Flutie, another guy who, to me, I never see him in that uniform. To me, he was a Buffalo Bill. I see him more in that uniform than I do as a San Diego Charger. But he talked about that. Some great speeches. I mean, Adam Vinatieri. I grew up playing all sports, but as I've mentioned, I'm Brazilian American, so for me, soccer was kind of like not even an option as far as would I like it. It would be more, would I like it, would I want to play it, and I did really enjoy playing as I grew up, and so and it was one of the ones that came more naturally to me. But I love playing sports, all sports, growing up. So we played football, basketball, baseball, everything. But for me, when I was playing, I did end up being a kicker because I played soccer, and I was going to transition and do some other sports as well. But at the time, there was nobody to kick for the team in my high school, so I actually did that for a while. Did some DB, but mostly was just the main kicker for the team. And so for me, Adam Vinatieri was just so cool to watch him do his work, even though he wasn't a 49er. Just a guy that I really admired. He was a soccer style guy, and so just a guy that knew how to kick and in big moments. So I always wondered, because of how many big moments he had and big kicks to win Super Bowls, if he would ever get in. There's so few kickers and punters in the Hall of Fame. But so he got in with guys like Drew Brees and Luke Kuechly, who was incredible. I didn't watch a ton of Luke play because I didn't watch a lot of Panther football, but every time I did see, I mean, he was just kind of like that Urlacher type of dude who was just everywhere, it seemed like, and a much better athlete, I would say, too. Just he had, I think, over 20 career interceptions, something crazy like that, and for a linebacker, so I just thought it was really cool to get this particular class together. I mean, Larry Fitzgerald, for my money, is the second greatest wide receiver I ever saw. Jerry obviously being the first. And numbers aside, I just love the way Larry Fitzgerald played from the very beginning. The guy was really classy, true professional. Whether he was playing with third, fourth string quarterbacks or whether he had Kurt Warner, I love watching him play. So it was cool to see him get enshrined. But, I mean, we wouldn't be doing a 49ers channel if we didn't talk about the great number 33, Roger Craig. I mean, what can you say about Roger? He obviously divulged a lot about his personal life and his struggles right now that he's dealing with, and dealing with a form of muscular dementia, something of that nature. Again, it escapes me right now. See, I have my own stuff I'm dealing with. About to be 40 soon, so. But regardless, he really didn't have to go into his personal life that much and have a really important message to share, as well as obviously his love for this game and what this game has meant to him. I feel like Roger getting in, we all felt like Roger was a Hall of Famer, even if he never got enshrined. But, even though I'm still a bit young to have watched him play live a lot, especially in his prime, I mean, my family came over here, to this country like in '94. So for me, a lot of what I've watched of Roger, and I have watched a lot, but it's been, obviously a lot of highlights, game stuff, old game stuff that I've watched. And I try to just watch as much as I possibly could. And he was incredible. He's just incredible. I mean, when I think of guys like, we think of Christian McCaffrey right now as a dual threat guy, but before Christian, I mentioned Kurt Warner earlier when I was talking about quarterbacks, but Marshall Faulk, the guy that he played with, was the dual threat guy in our generation, late '90s, early 2000s. If you're, a teenager, and then eventually in college and all that kind of stuff, and that guy, to me, in that era, in that time period, he was the dual threat guy. You could drop it off to him for 5 yards, but he might get 15. And I think Roger, obviously with his signature run against the Rams, and he's just high kneeing all the way there. But to me, he was the guy that was the ultimate sort of fitness professional, dedicated at a time when guys were still, you see guys sometimes still like grabbing a smoke on the sideline. In the early '80s, fitness and being into a routine and really taking care of your body wasn't a big deal yet, other than like the professional bodybuilders that really took care of themselves in that way. Then it became such a big deal to where we see it today, where it's like everything, every detail about your life and how you train in the off season is something that you realize, oh, this is going to allow me to be at my best in the fourth quarter and in the playoffs. But back then, Roger was the guy that was running the hill. And I love that he never gets shy about saying, hey, I introduced the hill to Jerry. Jerry Rice made it famous, but I was the one that was running that thing first. And I love when other people keep giving Roger his due, because really he was still kind of the vet. I think he was already in the league maybe 1 or 2 seasons before Jerry arrived, definitely a few seasons before Jerry arrived. So, Jerry looked up to Roger Craig and Dwight Clark and all these guys. And so, it was just so cool to see, in whatever capacity he could be there to kind of be present and say, have his chance to throw his flowers at his coaches and his staff, his family, just amazing group of people over the years. And, I can't wait to continue to kind of delve deeper into learning more about the players. And I feel like I've learned a lot, but I always want to learn more. And I always like hearing stories about, what happened back then and, during the middle of the week in preparation for a big game and all these kind of things, and the mentality in the locker room. And I mean, I love what Roger said, that they weren't chasing records and they weren't chasing stats. They were chasing wins, that was the whole thing. The whole 1,000 thing would have been awesome. 1,000 yards receiving and 1,000 yards rushing, even if you don't win, as we've seen. But the fact that he was doing that and helping to propel an offense that was ahead of its time, that Bill Walsh empowered him and saw him in Nebraska and said, I know this guy can execute something that is of the future. And I don't even know if Bill saw it, that it would continue to have legs for this many years after, he stopped coaching and then obviously he's departed this earth. But man, it is so cool to see, because a lot of what we see now is based off of what the West Coast offense and what Roger was doing back then. So much of the drop off game to the running backs and finding your outlets in the flat, taking 2 or 3 yards and making that 7, 8 yards. I mean, we know it's huge. 2nd and 2 is way better than 2nd and 8. And that's the thing. In the drive, I always remember that. Roger making big plays at the end of that. To go 92 yards, you need a lot of these. You can't just be the slants and the big bombs. It was a methodical thing that we always did in our offense. So, Joe finding obviously Jerry later, but he was finding Roger early in that drive, and it's like 5 yards here, 6 yards there. He's finding the tight end. He's finding all these shorter passes, and these guys are taking it 5 yards, 6 yards, sometimes 10, sometimes 12. And all of a sudden, you're getting down the field in a hurry, even though you're only getting small chunks of yards for the most part until Jerry broke that big one, right? And then you get John Taylor, obviously, there at the end to just seal it off beautifully. But none of that happens if you don't have a Roger Craig that they have to worry about. Is he gonna run the ball? the 49ers didn't have much time on the clock, but they had enough time to kind of run it a couple times, to at least make the defense think, hey, maybe they're going to do this. But, he was just such a good receiver and another weapon to utilize the way that the 49ers and the way that Kyle Shanahan utilizes Christian McCaffrey these days, So it's so cool to see that. And obviously it bodes well. I mean, Christian would get in, I think, anyways, because of the way the game is viewed now, compared to in Rodgers' time, what he was doing, with how it was viewed as such a revolutionary thing that no one had ever seen before, right? So, but still, it's still cool to see that, and just reaffirms the fact that, Christian's going to be there someday. And it would be cool maybe someday if he talks about guys like Roger Craig and Marshall Faulk and all these dual threat running backs as a dual threat guy himself. So, so the speeches were a lot of fun to see. A lot of cool things out of camp. Obviously, Brock apparently is just ripping it in camp and is looking great. And so that's always fun. We had some injuries along the way, and I haven't gotten a chance to get on here and talk about, it is tough when a guy like Ricky goes down, and, then what do you do? What do you turn to? Well, I mean, Debo looks pretty fit to me. I mean, he looks as fit as he's ever looked. And so I think that was such a great thing that he was still out there to be signed. And in some ways, and in some very specific ways, Debo is an upgrade, right? Because what Debo can do, much like we're talking about Roger, Debo is a dual threat. You can put him in the backfield, and he's a pretty dangerous running back, in some space, with some good schemes blocked up right. He can take 5 yards and take it to the house. And so, something that was blocked up for 5 yards, he can take it 10, 15 or to the house, So not so bad to have, if we had to lose somebody, and it sucks to lose anybody at this early on in camp, but if you had to do it, it was nice that you could sign a guy like Debo that knows our offense, knows our building. I love what he said in his presser. He's like, hey, it was kind of like I never left. He's gone for a whole year, but the locker room looked the same, the staff's the same, everyone sounds the same, everything looks the same. He knows where everything is. I'm like, yeah, it's like kind of like going back to your house after that first year of college. You go back to your parents' house and visit. Hopefully it looks about the same as it did when you left. And so that was just kind of a cool thing to be able to see that. Kind of, even though there was an injury, that we were able to replace that injury and not really skip a beat with getting Debo, and a Debo that looks really fit and really motivated. So I am excited, because when Debo is motivated and is fit, I mean, that's when he's had his best seasons. So that'll be fun. Everything else for the most part, guys are getting little things here and there, but nothing that it seems like it's too concerning. Obviously, the biggest thing was, Kyle Shanahan and his car accident. We're getting more and more details now, but, having your head coach go through something like that. I mean, I was in a hit and run recently, and thankfully it didn't give me the kind of injuries that Kyle Shanahan's dealing with. But it's still, man, just even driving, when you're driving at night, you have to kind of wonder, like, what, could it happen again? You kind of have that trauma a little bit. The sound of it, it just ruined the entire backside of the car that's been replaced now. But, it's just stuff like that where, you're stressing over it. What could I have done differently? You're blaming yourself. In my case, I went through it in my head a million times. I'm like, there's nothing I could have done differently. But for him, he's such a perfectionist in his craft that it doesn't surprise me that he's still blaming himself for having the car, on autopilot, whatever. I don't have a fancy car coach, so I couldn't do that. I wasn't on autopilot. Somebody just hit the brakes too hard in front of me, and it was unavoidable. So, and I keep my distance too. So, it's all about safe driving, But it's good to have Coach back and feeling not 100%, but pretty close and getting there. And so, we'll see how everything kind of works in terms of that first preseason game and who gets the reps. But I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see Romello Height, Strib City, Strib to the crib, call him whatever you like. I want to see the kid succeed. I know Mac Jones is calling him the Flying Hawaiian. You can't do that, Mac. Sorry, that was Shane Victorino. But we'll find a different one. I think there's plenty of good nicknames that we can call him if he starts speeding past people and getting touchdowns. I'm sure that DeJon Stribling is going to love any nickname you give him. Any positive nickname, right? And so But yeah, Dejan. But to me, and like I said, Romelo, I'm excited to see a guy like Grayson Halton, to be honest. And I think he was dinged up a bit, but I think he's back at practice already, for what I read the other day. So Grayson Halton, like I said, is a guy I really, really liked his work going back to the Senior Bowl when I was doing my kind of draft scouting process, obviously amateur scouting, but still something I've done now for feels like a decade, and something I really care about. And I just liked his work, man. I like his explosiveness. I love the fact that he understands the hand usage. I feel like he's already ahead of where a lot of rookies would be with that kind of stuff, knowing how to have, I always call it a multiplicity of moves, but he doesn't get predictable to one move. And so we'll see. Again, Romello height, I think, be interested to see what he's got. And then we'll see some of these other guys. There's some of those mid to late round guys, that we haven't talked about for a little while. And so we'll see how all that works out. But lots of competition in the secondary. So I'm kind of curious to see how that secondary looks early in the game, but even late in game, some guys that might still have a chance to get some snaps at nickel and other things like that. So we'll see how that looks. And really we're gonna get a chance to see all the like Kalon Black and guys like that to get to run the rock a lot. Obviously, as CMC is not going to be doing a ton of that in the preseason, especially after the first drive or so. So I'm excited. I think he can get a lot of play this year. I really do. So it'll depend obviously on the health of guys around him. But yeah, man, Kalon is a guy that I love the way he runs, and that dude is just a very physical and just built really tough. I mean, he's built as strong as you can be built at that position, and he's got that great short area burst that I personally really love. Those first 5 to 10 yards, I think, for running backs are way more key to me than their 40-yard dash. So I'm excited to watch just these preseason games because, again, as my kind of nerding out, geeking out of scouting goes, it just never stops in terms of even exhibition games, So I'm excited to see these young guys get out there and get to play, and we'll see. I'm hearing good things about guys like Connor Colby as well. Put on some weight, and apparently he's looking good in that left guard spot opposite Pooney. So we'll see. I think he's going to get some play, maybe more so in this preseason than a lot of the other starters along the line, just because, again, he didn't get a ton of play and ton of reps last year. But if he's looking really good in camp and they believe in him, you got to get as many reps against sort of live bullets as you can right in the preseason. So it's close. It's close. We're a month away, guys. We are a month away from the season starting on September 10th in Melbourne, and I cannot wait. So thank you so much. I want to bring as much content as possible. Apologies for not being on more often, but I can't wait. I'm going to be on here a lot more often. So thank you so much. Make sure to like and subscribe as always. Thank you and take care, faithful.